If you've been following the going-ons of the tech world, you'll know that it's kind of a confusing and honestly bad time for the newcomers in this tech/PC space. So this tech news video is gonna straighten out those going-ons. The main topic, you could call it, is of course the global chip and semiconductor shortage and its causes. But before we get to that, we'll talk about Intel's new Rocket Lake and future CPUs, Intel's plan to manufacture chips for other companies, Microsoft's plans to acquire yet another telecommunication company, and also more graphics cards that Nvidia is rumored to be planning on launching. So let's start off with Microsoft. If you didn't know, Discord, yes, that communications app that you use when you're playing video games with your friends, has been looking for a company to acquire them for 10 billion US smackaroonies. This is more than Microsoft paid to acquire Skype, which was only 8.5 billion US dollars. This acquisition would help Microsoft since they would have an entire community at their hands since they failed to acquire TikTok, and they could work on tightly coalescing Xbox and Discord, which might actually be more convenient for Xbox gamers. They might also have another motive for this acquisition. You see, Discord uses Google Cloud, and it would be so much better for Microsoft if Discord migrates to their Azure cloud, and they can do so if they buy over Discord. Alright, now let's move on to good old Intel. There seems to be a lot of Intel news, even though their new CPUs are kinda meh. Anyway, we'll get to that later. Intel, as you probably know, manufacture their own chips, for the most part, but they've never been a foundry for other companies, if that makes sense, like fabs, including TSMC and Samsung Electronics, until now. That's right, on March 23rd, Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, announced that Intel would be dropping 20 billion US dollars for building 2 fabrication centers in Arizona. Why, you may ask? Well, this gives them a chance to make this a separate business altogether, which can mitigate the losses on either side, kind of like AMD's global foundries. This would also mean that there are more chips being made that are spread across the world instead of just being made in Asia. Alright, back to Intel CPUs. You might have heard that the Core i7 11700K, which should have gone live on March 30th, unofficially launched earlier on March 5th. Apparently, Mind Factory, a retailer in Germany, sold 1100Ks before the launch, which obviously means we got early benchmarks, for example from AnandTech and Gamers Nexus. Now, as of the day of recording, the 11th gen CPUs have officially launched, and it's a power hog and heat dispenser, at least the i7 and i9 variants are. The 11700K and 11900K both peak to well over 250 watts of power consumption in AVX 512 mode. That peak is still about double the power consumption of the Ryzen 9 5900X. So yeah, an inferno of a CPU and powerhouse. I mean, a powerhouse in a bad way, like it draws a lot of power. Anyway, the Ryzen chips 5600X, 5800X, and 5900X all beat out the corresponding Intel chips in rendering type tasks and trade blows with each other in gaming benchmarks, with Ryzen still having the edge. Okay, so 11th gen was kind of a bust for Intel, but what about the future plans for their CPUs? As it turns out, they do have plans for completely redesigning their CPU microarchitectures. For next year, we're rumored to have Alder Lake 12th gen built around a 10 nanometer architecture instead of 14 nanometers that they've been stuck on for the past few generations. By the way, Intel says that Rocket Lake is 10 nanometer but ported to 14 nanometer, which means that it's still in a 14 nanometer package. They had to do this because of a combination of poor yield of the silicon and maybe even production capacity. More than that, it'll be a hybrid of performance cores, Golden Cove, and high efficiency cores, Gracemont, kind of like Apple's M1 processors. Alder Lake is also rumored to add support for DDR5 RAM and PCIe Gen 5. Raptor Lake 13th gen seems to be rumored to just be a refresh of Alder Lake with the same LGA 1700 socket, so you could theoretically upgrade from Alder Lake to Raptor Lake without buying a new motherboard. And finally, the most exciting generation, Meteor Lake. According to the rumors, Meteor Lake will be built on a 7 nanometer architecture and possibly still use the LGA 1700 socket that the previous 2 generations are rumored to use. It's also rumored that Intel will use a multiple chiplet design like AMD's already doing. This will hopefully make their CPUs more scalable and more power efficient. And they also might make it 3D and stack those chiplets. This can allow them to cram more things like an AI engine, more cores, etc. I don't know what the thermal situation would be like though, stacking those chiplets like that. Now let's move on to GPUs. None are available, but Nvidia's launching the 3070 Ti and 3080 Ti anyway, at least according to the rumors. The 3080 Ti is, on paper, spec'd very closely to the RTX 3090 with a 384-bit bus, almost the same amount of CUDA cores, etc, etc. The 3070 Ti, on the other hand, mostly benefits from having GDDR6X VRAM instead of GDDR6. The 3070 Ti is rumored to have two variants, an 8GB VRAM version and a 16GB VRAM version. Pricing is still yet to be confirmed, but with the current state of things, it low-key doesn't matter. Speaking of the current state of things, the global chip shortage. For those of you who somehow don't know, there's a shortage of semiconductors, silicon, which obviously means there's a shortage of what they're used to make. Cars, smart devices, and of course, GPUs and CPUs. So at the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020, fabricators like TSMC and Samsung slowed down production, and automakers like Nissan and GMC reduced orders, thinking that COVID would lower the demand for semiconductor chips and cars, which couldn't be further from the truth. At first, demand did go down, but sometime later, demand came cascading back because more people than ever wanted cars, since there's a virus going around and no one wants to or can use public transportation. On top of that, there was an upsurge in demand for PCs because people now have to work from home, and that 10-year-old clunky computer is just not cutting it anymore. As if that isn't enough, companies like Microsoft and Zoom Technologies had to seriously bolster their cloud centers, since there are millions of more people now communicating through Teams and Zoom. This of course means more server computers that need to be deployed, which means more silicon and processors being used. Which brings us to GPUs. Why are there literally none available, at least at MSRP? Well, Nvidia and AMD predicted way short of how much demand there really would be. Actually, they pumped out more GPUs than it looks like they did, but it just pales in comparison to the Actually, they pumped out more GPUs than it looked like they did, but it just pales in comparison to the demand. And they can't just make more because there are literally only two fabs in the world who can make these chips specifically, Samsung and TSMC. They're already operating at 100% capacity instead of the usual 80 to 90% because of the increased demand. Making a bad situation worse, there are the scalpers. If you don't know what I'm talking about, here's a rundown. There are groups of people who coordinate bots to go out and buy stuff as soon as it's available, and then they take that product and sell it on eBay or Amazon for 2-3 times MSRP. The focused product keeps changing, but right now, it's graphics cards. Scalpers saw an opportunity to make money, they took it. It's a really terrible thing, especially considering people actually buy these scalp products, but there's not much we can do about it. And I haven't even mentioned crypto miners yet. We are currently in another crypto mining boom. I mean, a single Bitcoin is worth just shy of $60,000 at the time of recording. So of course, there are miners buying out all the GPUs they can to mine for cryptocurrencies. You'd think that would be enough, but it also happens that Taiwan, where a lot of chips are made, is facing the worst drought in a few decades. That is a lot of big problems right there. TSMC and Samsung are working on solutions though. TSMC is planning on building a chip factory in Arizona for $35 billion and Samsung is also planning to set up a fab in the US for $17 billion in the next couple of years. Nvidia has tried to help, that's in quotes, because obviously that move was a cash grab, by adding a 50% hash limiter driver on the RTX 3060, calling it unhackable, and selling a cryptocurrency mining GPU specifically to miners. Of course, the unhackable RTX 3060 hash rate limiter drivers got hacked, so the RTX 3060 can mine at a comfortable 45 mega hashes per second anyway. By the way, the hash rate refers to the mining efficiency of a GPU, if you didn't know. And the last point I want to address is, why are some products readily available and some aren't? For example, all Nvidia and AMD GPUs cannot be found for MSRP, 5000 series AMD CPUs can sometimes be found for MSRP, and most, if not all Intel CPUs can be found for MSRP. So, what gives? Well, as I alluded to before, Nvidia, AMD, Intel, Apple, all these companies, they have to project and predict how many of their product they're going to sell. For Intel and Apple, their unit sales have been dropping, starting at about 2017 and 2015, respectively, so they predicted lower sales, which came true since you can buy those products. For Nvidia, AMD, and even Xbox and PlayStation, those consoles still use AMD Big Navi. This was an exciting and the most highly anticipated launch in a few years, so of course, their predictions were way short of the actual demand, which means there was an insufficient supply. So when will supply and demand equalize? Well, the CEO of Qualcomm, Cristiano Amon, said in an interview with CNET that it might be late 2021 before the severe shortage ends, and it seems like Mike Orme, a thematic research consultant at Global Data for the semiconductor industry, agrees that it might be late 2021 when things normalize. In my opinion, it might take a few more months after the end of 2021 for things to go completely back to normal. So that could be light at the end of the tunnel for the tech world. Anyway, hopefully this video informed newcomers and people who are just confused about what's happening in the tech world. If it did, why not hit that like button to let the algorithm know you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing for more tech content on the way. But other than that, I will see you in the next video.